Hi everyone, this is a follow-up video of my last video where I did the built-in wardrobe. This is a built-in TV/entertainment unit. There's a few different techniques and a few little bits and pieces which I thought are worthy of a little video themselves, so here we go. I ran over the Carcass kind of construction on my last video, but I do think it's worth pointing out that you need to try and cut all the same pieces at the same time. It's really a pain in the butt to try and have to go back and cut a piece that was meant to be the same as another piece, whereas you could have just counted up how many pieces of the same length you needed and cut them all at the same time. That is a super good time saver. On a short carcass like this, I typically will always use a 100mm wide top rail, which then whatever top you're going to use, be it stone or timber, can sit on top of. And because I use a full thickness back panel, that provides a lot of support along the back, and pretty much any top, stone or timber, could span the distance between the vertical partitions in the carcass. Right, so all the show panels in this TV unit are going to be poplar plywood, and because of supply issues I can only get 15mm or 16mm ply, but that's fine. It actually helps out in a way. So first of all, got to cut all the pieces I need down to the right size, and I need to make a bunch of shelves that you see each side of the TV, the exposed shelves. They're going to be 30mm thick, so 2 layers of this plywood. The easiest way I've found to do this is to simply cut the panels, ideally slightly oversized, throw some glue on it, throw some brads, pins into it, hold them together. At the same time, you want to fill up those nail holes, then you can get on with doing your edging and whatever. By the time you finish that, you can come back, sand it, and everything's ready for paint really quick and fast. So with all the plywood pieces pretty much ready to paint and about to be primed, I can come back to work on the carcass. I finally got the order of hardware I needed, so I can put the feet on, cut the tops and put them on to the carcass. Once we'd screwed the 2 carcasses together, that is, and kind of leveled everything up, we could pretty much work up from there. The doors in this case are all MDF, and I did run through the door making process on my last video. Here's a quick snippet of how it's all done. I would like to say, on top of what I've already said, is that I really do prefer making a 5-panel door wherever possible. A lot of people these days are just taking a sheet of MDF and cutting or routing a pocket into it, calling it a shaker door, whereas every one of those I've seen does not sit straight flat. The surface tension difference really creates a problem with the doors, and they like to bow. So having a true 5-piece panel with MDF actually works really well, especially if you completely glue every joint and every part of the door up. It just turns into one big piece of MDF again in a much more stable fashion than it would be if it was a single piece with a pocket cut. The client wanted a V-grooved back panel, as if it was tongue and grooving paneling. So we're using 12mm poplar plywood. I have the 6mm thick grooving blade, which works really well if you tilt it over to 45 degrees, which is very hard to see here, and just raise the blade up just enough to poke through and create a nice even V. It's a really fast way of making V-ed paneling, whereas you can pretty much not find this anywhere on the shelf. It's in a furniture grade type material. So I've got my story rod, which is the same height as my doors. I've taped a 2mm packet to the top, That way I can just butt that up underneath the top and I get a consistent result as I go along. Now, occasionally you get a situation where you are hanging doors on both sides of a single divider, and if the hinge plates are in exactly the same place on each side, the screws hit each other. So on this story rod I've got my standard 100mm spacing for hinges, and then on the other side I've got 115mm, and as long as you keep track of which side is which, you shouldn't have any problems when you come to hang your doors. You don't want to drill the 100mm hole in the door on the 115 door, vice versa. Anyhow, so I've decided that the right hand side of all these is going to be the 115 spacing. So I can just put my story rod up here. Mark that, and then on the other side I can do the 100mm. I don't like putting lots and lots of shelf pin holes in cupboards. I think it looks ugly and most of the time they're not used. So before the hinge plates go on, I just make a really simple jig, throw a couple of holes in, and then the shelf pins are done. Okay, so typically with a full cover hinge, you'd use a 0 or 3mm mount, which is what I'm using here. Both of those work within the adjustability range. Now when you want to have a door on each side of a single divider, you need a half cover hinge, which means that the door is only going to cover half of that divider. In this case, we've opted, and these days most people are using soft close hinges. It can be tricky to get a soft close half cover hinge for some reason, and sometimes it is easier just to be set up to use full cover hinges all the time. So instead of using a 3mm mount, I can use a 9mm mount, 9mm being half of 18. So I can put a 9mm mount on here. It's going to hold my hinge 9mm away, which means a full cover hinge is going to work as a half cover. And it's just a good way to get around the issue. I think one of the biggest problems with making shaker doors is that you have to somehow clean up the internal corner, and it's a pain in the butt to sit there with a hand sandpaper block or just hand sandpaper and try and accurately make a reasonable kind of little round over so your paint will stick. This is the first time I've tried this technique and it seemed to work really well. Set up a guide for my little router and have a 45 chamfer bit in there, and just deep enough to just take the corner off that inside edge. And after I got into the swing of things, it was a really quick way to take care of that internal edge, and I didn't have to touch it with sandpaper at all. I've said this before, but you obviously don't have to have one of these, but if you're in the business of making anything with a door, you should have one of these machines. The doors are fitted and off to paint. We've got the big panels back from painting for the upper units, so we can start assembling them. Because I was using 15mm plywood, I was able to take a couple of liberties by just screwing the shelves into position, and then after the main body was together, I could just throw some dominoes in as deep as the domino would plunge, and hammer some dominoes in, which would take care of the static load issues. right on flush. Are you flush? Yeah. Just I'll go up one side. Because plywood can have the tendency to not stay straight, if any of your shelves are slightly bowed at this point, now is a good time to hold them straight and then pin them in through the back panel from the back, and you shouldn't have any problems. With the 3 shelving units made and screwed together in place, I need to cover the join between those 3, and I'm just using a small strip of MDF painted up, and I'll actually use that as my story rod for the other couple, and just mark where I'm going to put some lamello clips. Before I clip them on, I'll just throw in this box, which I made up quickly just by shooting some plywood together, throwing some paint onto it. I'll talk more about that a bit later on. Now that we're all painted, I did show this tip in my last video, but I didn't actually have these blocks glued on. And so you can imagine if the wall is right here and you're trying to fit this scriber, if you don't have anything to stop the scriber, this just keeps sliding in, or it can do. Once you get the fit right, you can actually lose your scriber and it's a pain in the butt. So having those positive stops there is super handy. Okay, so the way that the toe kick interacts with the skirting boards on the wall is different on every job, because every house has got something unique about its skirting. In this case, the skirting is only 87 millimeters above the carpet, so it makes a lot of sense. It's very easy in that case when we can have a 100 mil toe kick, and the whole unit is just going to sit just above the skirting, which means we don't have to worry about cutting any skirting off anywhere. All we have to do is scribe our toe kick into the skirting that is existing, and the small gap between the two heights is hidden back underneath where the feet are. So that's a super easy way to deal with how the skirting interacts with the toe kick. Another way that can work, although I haven't done this many times, but sometimes it is a lifesaver, where you have a very large or quite a wide scriber on the end, which means that you can see this scriber in the toe kick area, and your cabinet toe kick can just butt up to this panel. Let's say the house skirting board is way up at this level. That means your cabinetry either has to be away from the wall by the thickness of the skirting, which is a bit of a pain in the butt, although sometimes that can be a lifesaver if the walls are really crooked. Sometimes it's easier just to cut out all the skirting that's in the way, especially if it's taller than your carcass. And then you can do something like that, or something like the system I'm using now. Like that. So where the cabinets join together, I clipped on the capping, I'll call it. I've got the same size piece to go on the end, which would technically be a scriber, I suppose. And I haven't done clips on this because I don't know exactly where this wants to sit. The benefit of doing this system is that, especially when you've got a house with reasonably straight walls, if you know that it's not too crooked, you don't have to actually do much scribing. What you can do is just place this scriber onto the cabinet, push it up against the wall tight, and you could glue it in place. Often I'll actually use super glue, run super glue up the space here, and then just squish that in. The overhang on this side can be anything you like. If you end up being really close to the wall with your carcass, this scriber can overhang as much as you like because you can't see it, and it follows the wall nicely. What I like about this is that you don't lose any width of your scriber, and you have a very even look between the 4 different vertical partitions. Sometimes if you've got a lot to scribe off, you can noticeably see that there's runoff on the wall or there's runoff on the scriber, and unfortunately that makes us as cabinet makers, furniture makers, look bad because that's the end product. You know, we can't do much about a crooked wall. All we can do is make the unit fit inside of a crooked wall. So when it's not too crooked, and you don't really have to scribe at all, you can just glue that in place. So what's the point in making this box here? The TV will sit on this. This opening here will cater for a 65-inch TV. The problem that I've come across in the last year or so is that a lot of people here, at least, like soundbars that go in front of the TV, and there's no space for them. Often the soundbar sticks up higher than the TV is held up by its own little feet, or if it's hanging off the wall, often it's given a very small tolerance around inside the cabinet, and you place a soundbar in front of it, and it covers the TV. And I've seen it on quite a few places where the soundbar ends up off to the side. Because typically you can't get cabling up to the top to have the soundbar above, which would be the next best choice. Right in the middle at the bottom is the best place for a soundbar. So I'm making a little step to allow for a soundbar. The TV can sit on top. Also, the actual cabinet itself is lower than I would usually make. I used to make these cabinets 800 high. Now I'm coming down to 700. This is just sitting in here, so the clients can take it out if they want, but there's a little notch here to allow for cabling for the soundbar. There's a hole here for cabling to the TV, and then through down into the carcass. Okay, we're on site now, and time to put it all together. Yeah, this is looking good there. See if you can find those screws. Should be just underneath that architrave. Oh, that's good. If you want to stretch it. Yeah, but we'll just wait until we get the other ones up. Just check that wall. We're going to straight up. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Alright, let's go home. After finding a few studs in the wall, I could put a couple of brackets from the top of the cabinet into the wall studs so the whole unit can't fall over. When it comes to putting handles on doors, I used to always just make up a very simple plywood jig on the day, but after buying one of these true precision jigs, man, they are super cool, and you can pretty much do any handle you like on them, so yeah, pretty cool little tool. Typically with this kind of project, the connection between the top shelves and the lower cabinets is never perfect, and we almost always end up caulking that join, which I actually think looks better than anything else really. The carpets in this house are going to be replaced in the next couple of months or so, so I've just dry fitted the skirtings and pressed them into place so they can be removed if need be for the carpet layers. And that's it, one built-in TV wall unit thing. Hopefully some people get something out of this video. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you guys on the next one.